I think that the low expectations Tim Walz set for himself are like real, right? Like JD is an oily debate prep kid. Tim Walz is going to do way better at the tailgate, like being a normal human than JD Vance is. But JD might be better in this setting. If the team feels like Walz can like nail a couple of punches, what I probably would just do is prep him on a couple things and have him get really, really right on it and only do those, because you do not want a freewheeling insult contest tonight. Like, that's a loser for Tim Walz. Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. Tonight, we are live on YouTube during the debate. Come hang, search for the Bulwark on YouTube if you haven't subscribed yet. I want to wish a happy 100th birthday to Jimmy Carter and also rest easy to Dikembe Mutombo, Mount Mutombo. He died of brain cancer, 58 yesterday. And yes, Donald Trump's surrogate and failed actor Rob Schneider did accuse him of dying via the COVID vaccine. So that's what we're dealing with out there. I will discuss all of that and more with Democratic strategist extraordinaire, author of Any Given Tuesday, New York tabloid maven, my friend Lis Smith. Welcome back to the Bulwark Podcast.
Hey, Tim. Thanks for having me. It's been a while.
What's up, girl? Jimmy said he's trying to make it to the Georgia early vote to get his vote in for Kamala. That's wonderful. Do you have any Jimmy Carter stories? And it's a little before your time, but I don't know.
No, I do. You know, I spent the last day that Pete Buttigieg was in the presidential race in Plains, Georgia. And I got to meet Jimmy Carter. He was absolutely lovely. I actually wrote about this in my book, I
knew that. I read the book. I knew that. I'd forgotten.
That he had sat down with Pete and told Pete, you know, you did a good run, but it's time to drop out. Then we get to this cafe, sits down, and his staff had been like, absolutely no press for him. And the first thing he does when he sees the press is ask each of them to introduce themselves, say what outlet they're with, and like to ask him any questions. And like, what was I going to do? Tackle the then 96-year-old or 95-year-old former president? No, but truly lovely and like really a model ex-presidency and just a very, very virtuous man. So fingers crossed for him that he gets his last wish here.
His last vote. Did he give any good quotes? Did he make any news?
You know what, he sort of did, but the press didn't really pick up on it. He said to the press, like, well, you know, he's got to figure out what he's going to do now or something like that. And it sort of alluded to the fact that Pete was going to drop out that evening, but we hadn't yet announced it to the press, and the press was absolutely shocked when we actually told them. But he was lovely. Plains is a really lovely town, just small, picturesque, and again, just a real model ex-presidency.
I love Jimmy Carter. That's sweet. And this is why us flacks, well, me, I guess, not you. You're still flacker. Flip into the media, because we don't miss things like that. We won't miss a story like that like these journalists did. Just letting Jimmy fly right over their head. He gave him the scoop. 95-year-old Jimmy Carter gave him the scoop. They didn't get it. All right, we're gonna do a little debate preview. Liz has advised Tim Ryan and watched the Vance Senate debates with him last time. Your old boss Pete Buttigieg was at Camp North Star, apparently dressed as Vance in according to Politico, a cheap red tie instead of camp casual attire. And so I'm just wondering, what are you expecting here from both Tim Walz and JD Vance?
Well, the only thing I'll say about the inside of that debate prep, which I wasn't in debate prep, but obviously keep in touch with Pete, people around him who were there, is that tie was very red and very, very cheap. It was horrifying, because Pete has such a distinct visual brand, like the white rolled up shirts, rolled up sleeves, the blue tie. Seeing him in this eyesore of a red tie was very, very disorienting. But seriously, though, I did dozens and dozens.
Hold on, I'm sorry. I've got to challenge you there as a host. Pete had awful outfits before he came out. Like the pictures of Pete as a closeted Mayor Pete, his like the offenses against our sartorial eyes are like the equivalent of Donald Trump's offenses against the Constitution and democracy. I mean, that is how awful his outfits were. So he probably had it still in his closet.
They were pretty bad. But unfortunately, I never met in the closet Pete. I only met out of the closet Pete when he was dressing slightly better. I wouldn't say that he's like, the political equivalent of Tom Ford, but no. He has a good uniform. It works for him. And he does not wear these like eyesore bright red polyester ties.
All right.
Okay, the debate. What I would say is, like, generally vice presidential debates really, really, really don't matter. And I have seen some people saying, and I do think that there could be an argument that this one matters a little bit more than previous ones. And David Axelrod made the point yesterday that, with a president as old as Donald Trump, the vice president matters more. We clearly saw that with Joe Biden. And so more eyes will be on J.D. Vance. I think eyes will be on J.D. Vance as a possible, God help us if Trump gets elected, too old to serve, but also eyes on Vance as sort of the natural heir to the MAGA movement if Trump loses. With Tim Walz, I also think that there could be more eyes on him than usual with a VP candidate, just because the nature of the shortened campaign, which is that a lot of voters still don't have completely formed opinions on Kamala Harris. I think it's a third of voters say they want to hear more about her. So he can help fill in some of those blanks, hopefully fill them in very positively. But from all indications, as someone who unfortunately watches 2022 Senate debates, Vance is a very good debater. And he's gotten a lot of practice on this during this campaign because he takes a lot of questions from the media. He goes, essentially everywhere. He goes on hostile news networks and takes questions and gaggles at his events. And that is really, really good practice. We have seen less of that from Walz. And so he's probably going to be less sharp than Vance in that regard. And it warmed my flack heart when one of the first things he said when Kamala picked him was he warned her that he's a bad debater. So he did a very good job early on of setting the expectations very low for his performance.
So I want to get into the Vance, but since you're talking about that, let's talk about the Walz side of this, because I'm kind of torn, and I'm wondering what your advice would be if you were in the room there at Camp North Star. Because on the one hand, I could see an argument that Walz's goal is really just to be appealing, be affable, assuage any concerns about the Harris-Walz ticket that they're going to be, whatever, Marxist, far leftists, talk a little bit about kind of mainstream policy priorities that they want, not get into the mud with J.D. Vance, roll his eyes at him a couple times and move forward. And then there's another part of me, the attack dog part of me, that's like, JD, there's so much material. I mean, everybody goes to America's Hitler, but he's literally flip-flopped on everything. And he was me. Right. He was Tim Miller. He was like a climate change, pro-gay rights, pro-immigration, like Republican, like 5 years ago. And so, how would you try to strike that balance if you were at Walz?
Yeah, so you do need to reassure people about the Harris-Walz agenda, that it's not going to be some, crazy communist leftist thing. And that is, it's not a concern, but people do have questions like, what do they stand for? Where in the Democratic Party spectrum are they? And, the people I know in my life who are undecided, that's sort of the questions that they have. Like, is this going to be a radical ticket or just sort of like a make things better Democratic Party that is more, sort of broad-based? So I think that's important, but I do think it is pretty important to try to draw JD offsides, right? To put him on defense. And, I don't know specifically how Walz is going to do that. I don't have any insight into that, but there are a few, I think that they could go at the flip-flops, right? And I think JD Vance is someone who does not like having his integrity questioned, who does not like having his motives questioned. And we've seen him get defensive in interviews when that happens. A good recent example was with Dana Bash when she sort of called him out for just lying and about the Haitians eating cats and household pets and all that whole episode. So I think you can go at that, but you can also go at, you can go at the weird angle, right? This is a guy who, I'm 41 years old. I just had a kid a year ago. So like reproduction, fertility have been on the brain a lot lately, but this is a guy who talks more about like my fertility, my reproductive choices than I've ever thought about it. And there's something really weird about that. So, and I think that they can also go at like the extreme part. Another piece though, that I think Walz is uniquely suited to do is to do sort of a Midwest mano a mano, right? They're both sort of, from the Midwest, obviously slightly different regions, but J.D. Vance is someone who grew up there, who profited off it with his book, went to sort of Silicon Valley, I think, to be sort of like a Midwest planer, and then really went to Washington and sold the Midwest out. He, since going to Washington, he hasn't fought for the people he grew up with. He hasn't worked to combat the addiction crisis, worked to improve public education options for people who are stuck in, who are need more opportunities. He hasn't worked to help working middle class people. He voted for Trump's tax cuts, and I think that something like that, sort of a face off where he goes to what a lot of people see as Vance's core strength. I think that could be a smart route too. Curious what you think.
A lot
sort of
there.
Best ways.
Yeah, there's your cat just did like an Olympic jump over your shoulder off the table, which was really cool for the YouTube viewers. So that kind of distracted me for a second.
I'm talking about JD Vance. So he's as anti-cat a politician as you can get. So they're probably going to be a little exercised.
That's true. On brand. We're going to be exercised. So on the Walz side, I would be a little nervous to do the man thing. I see what you're saying, and in the speeches, I kind of like that riff about how, he says he's from Midwest, but he then went to Yale and then was a hedge fund guy and has a sugar daddy and then wrote a book selling everybody out. And I've been working in the community. I like it in the sense of I'm a regular person that actually cares about the community and cares about you. I worry a little bit about the macho. Tim Walz, despite being a football coach, I don't think that he's going to read macho to the young men.
I said I didn't mean man. I meant mano a mano, Midwestern versus Midwestern.
Not who's the alpha dog.
No, this is when you can tell you were a Republican. You think that this is not what Democrats do. We just really don't do dick measuring contests on debate stages. I know that's all you guys are about. It's all about these masculinity contests, but no, that is not at all.
No measuring needed here, but okay. Yeah. I hear you. Okay, so the Midwestern thing, I think that's right. I to be honest, I think that it's situational. I think that the low expectations Tim Walz set for himself are real. If you watch some of his debates, he is just okay. It's not his strength, right? JD is an oily debate prep kid. Debate team kid, Tim Walz is not. Tim Walz is going to do way better at the tailgate, being a normal human than JD Vance is. But JD might be better in this setting, in a studio. And so if the team feels like Walz can nail a couple of punches, what I probably would just do is prep him on a couple things and have him get really, really right on it and only do those, because you do not want a freewheeling insult contest tonight. That's a loser for Tim Walz. JD is bad is unappealing in every imaginable way, but he's gonna probably come away as the winner in an insult contest.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And he's very poised, and as unlikable as I generally find him, he's good in a debate setting, as we saw in 2022.
Yeah, talk about that. So for people who didn't watch 2022 debates, Tim Ryan ended up way overperforming Democrats. Ohio's a red state. He loses still. JD did way worse than Mike DeWine, by 12 points or something. Right. So, there's something to learn there. JD was did not light the room on fire in Ohio. But at the debates, Ryan is also kind of has an everyman vibe in a different way than Tim Walz does. And and JD would counterpunch on these hits, on abortion and stuff, and he did so pretty effectively. Objectively, it was pretty effective. To me, it was very unappealing because I find him unappealing in every imaginable way. But if you're just scoring on points, he was pretty good at parrying the attacks, I thought.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. Is the art of the counterpunch. To people who don't sort of do debate prep, don't really follow it, is where you can really see a skilled debater is not someone who can just attack their opponent. It's not just someone who can sort of respond well to an attack. Someone who can take an attack against them, turn it around, and go on offense and counterpunch. Yeah. And he did do that very well. I think Times yesterday had something going back to Vance's debates and talked about when Tim Ryan in one of the debates accused Vance of supporting the great replacement theory. And Vance turned it around and called Ryan a scumbag, and that this was imperiling the safety of his family and all of this. And he did it much more elegantly than I just did. But we did see that he was able to counterpunch pretty well. And on abortion, I got to say, I can't remember the exact exchange.
The abortion exchange, this is what it was. Because it was, remember, like right when Donald returned, it was that story of the young, like I was going to call her a young woman. She was a child who had to go across
10 years
state
old.
lines.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. She had to go across state lines to get an abortion because she'd been raped. And because of, the crackdown, and obviously a horrific story and a totally legit hit by Ryan. And Vance is like, well, but the culprit in this case was an undocumented immigrant.
Right. Yes. Yep.
And so then he just totally flipped it into immigration. Like he did the opposite of what Trump did. Like his debate when he was asked about immigration and started talking about his crowd sizes, he was asked about abortion and flipped it into immigration. Like Vance is going to be good.
Yeah. I if I recall correctly, I think Biden did that in the debate, but
both
in the
Biden
opposite.
and Trump did that. Biden did the exact opposite. Took abortion into immigration. Yeah, wrong. That's wrong. That's not what you're going for. If you're a Democrat, you're trying to take immigration into abortion. Okay. So the thing about Vance that is interesting to me tonight, I've heard a lot of people talk about that I'm interested in your take on, is it is two women who are the moderators. He likes to attack the media, right? You have Nora O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan. You mentioned his childless cat lady and like his kind of seething resentment for women. I noticed in Playbook this morning that he had deadbeat dad Jason Miller as part of his debate prep team. So I do think it's interesting that it's cool for JD Vance to hang out with people who have children and then don't take care of them or pay their alimony. But he really loathes women who choose not to have children or can't have children. So I think that's an interesting moral choice by JD Vance. But if I was his team tonight, that would be the thing I'd be the most worried about, is him like lashing out at Nora and Margaret in a way that feels misogynistic and just totally reinforces the childless cat lady stuff.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, they've telegraphed a fair amount about their debate prep, specifically that they're doing a lot of it. And I would be very, very surprised if he does not come very prepared for that dynamic and very scripted. I don't think we're going to see him lashing out and having a tone deaf moment on that. But, I could be wrong.
Here's my final thing on the debate. Looking forward, your initial point about how VP debates don't usually matter. The caveats to that, one of them, which you mentioned, is Donald Trump would be the oldest president of all time if he was president, and so that makes the JD question a little more relevant. The other is that it might be the last debate. Like it might be the debate that that's never been the case, right? Where the VP debate was the last debate, because there's always then another one or two presidential debates after it. And if Donald Trump continues to chicken out and refuse to debate Kamala Harris after she just whooped him in the first debate, then it could be kind of the last thing that people are left with. And so maybe it has a little bit more importance because of that. Or I don't know. Maybe not. What do you think?
Maybe. I don't know. The last debate sort of faded, I think, fairly quickly. Yeah. Minus the cats and dogs being
eating. The cats.
Yeah. Exactly. But I don't know. We'll see. I'm skeptical that this moves the needle much. But I'm also the same person that before the Biden-Trump debate went on a podcast with Dan Pfeiffer and said I was optimistic about how Biden would perform. In my defense, my expectations were so low that I did not think it would take much to meet them. So, but I'm just saying, take everything I say, all of my expectations about debates with a grain of salt.
This is why we have the yin and yang, so I have you on, because I would not say I was optimistic in that case. Or for Kamala, by the way. I was wrong. I was deeply nervous about Kamala in the first debate just because of lack of reps, and she's shown. Like she
was so good. Yeah.
Right. She stepped up to the plate, hoping we see the same for Walz. So I guess, what about just one final dick measuring thing, though, related to debates? It is crazy that Trump won't debate her again, right? I mean, how do you run the macho manhood campaign with Dana White and Hulk Hogan and then refuse to look at Kamala Harris in the first debate, get bitch slapped, and then refuse to debate her again?
Well, I mean, I think it's because he got bitch slapped, and he can fall back on the fact that he said he would do a June debate and a September debate, and that he met his obligations. And if I were him, if I were his team, I would say absolutely not. Don't go out again. But there's no indication that MAGA world punishes him for being inconsistent, that they punish him from backing away from the fights he says he's going to take on. So I don't think he's going to pay a political price.
The weakest alpha in history. It's really unbelievable. Okay.
Right. Well, it does. That's the one thing. It does give Kamala Harris just an opportunity to continue to dog him on that, and it's going to bother him.